What's up, everybody? Brian Elwood. Welcome back to the Virtual Real Estate Investing Podcast. This is episode number 47. So we're getting close to our 50th episode. I've really had a great time doing this podcast, and I appreciate all of the feedback that everyone's given me. I want to read a few of the reviews that I've gotten recently just to thank the people that took time to write me a review. The first one, Trevin Paraka says, Brian Elwood is terrific. I love his podcast, and he's taking the time out of your schedule on many occasions to talk with you personally about how to grow my business by hiring the right people for the right seats. Pebser says, Brian always talks about exactly what I want and need to hear. W. Staffer says, Brian gives tons of great nuggets about how to take yourself out of the day-to-day of your real estate business. Highly recommended. And Blah Blah Dan says, Brian speaks candidly about his experiences, which make him super relatable. I love how he covers topics that are REI specific, but also talks a lot about just being a good and healthy person. Whether you're an REI newbie or a vet, you'll get a lot out of this show. I really appreciate the ones of you who took time to write reviews. So thank you so much for doing that. On today's episode, I want to give you guys a little bit of backstory, some funny things that happened to me back in my time in corporate America. So this episode is for a lot of you folks who are still stuck in a job you don't like. I want to tell you what my terrible job was like, what I did to survive there, and then how I ultimately escaped that job. So after college, I went to University of Tennessee for college. I moved back to Nashville, tried to sell cars for a month. I sold one car, but I literally used to go to the bathroom and hide when customers would come onto the lot because I really did not like being a car salesman. And so it wasn't 3 or 4 weeks before a sales manager said, man, do you want to keep working here or not? And the writing was on the wall, so I quit that job and got a job at a corporate business, big healthcare company, and everyone was excited for me. I was excited. I had, quote unquote, a real job finally with benefits, and I could move up the company ladder and all of that stuff. Got my own cubicle, and basically what I was doing was insurance claims. So if someone goes to the doctor, there's a claim that gets created and sent to, let's say, Blue Cross Blue Shield or somebody like that. I was the one that had to call Blue Cross and make sure that the claim got paid and contested and whatever. So I basically had to work claims all day and sit on the phone with insurance companies and sort through all these technical issues. And if you know me at all, you know that that is absolutely the worst fit ever for my personality. I don't like details. I don't like repetitive tasks. I don't like dressing up nice. I don't like sitting in the same seat all day long. There were so many problems with that job. And I invented all these funny techniques to try and pass the time. I remember one day I decided to see how many of my own breaths I could count. You probably heard of conscious breathing. It's like a form of meditation. And so I sat there, and every time I breathed in and out, I would make a little tally on a Post-it note, and I got to like 100 conscious breaths that day. And that was literally, in some ways, my way of staying sane in that job. I would bring my guitar to the job and leave it out in the van and go out there on my breaks and play songs and sing in the back seat, practicing my music, because I used to be more of a musician than I am now and play around Nashville and stuff. To be in the back seat of the van, singing and playing guitar. And then I'd have to go upstairs again and work more insurance claims. And I was probably only making, I don't know, $30-something thousand a year. It wasn't a very high-paying job. It was definitely an entry-level job. Another funny thing that I did to pass the time at that job was, well, to back up for a second, there was a system that they had created that was designed to ensure the productivity of all of us employees. And so it tracked how frequently somebody worked one claim. And the system said that you had to work a claim every 10 minutes or less, or you would get dinged. Something would pop up as like a red mark on your report that, hey, he's taking a long time in between these claims. But if you if you did some kind of action every 10 minutes, then you didn't get dinged and you could float under the radar. So I figured this out, and I also figured out that I could work a claim in less than 1 minute, sometimes 20 or 30 seconds, but they gave you 10 minutes to work one. So what I would do is literally set a timer for 9 minutes. The timer goes off. I quickly worked and notated one claim in under a minute, so I was under 10 minutes total. Then I reset the timer for 9 minutes. And during the 9 minutes, I would watch Netflix. I had a little iPod that connected to the Wi-Fi there, and I would just watch show after show after show, 9 minutes at a time. I got through 5 seasons of Prison Break, Dexter, you name it, all while barely working, faking my way through this job. I would go to the bathroom and put down paper towels and do yoga in the bathroom, downward dog and stuff, so I didn't have to touch the floor. I would take walks and work on my singing, doing singing exercises. I would write lyrics to songs when I was at the cubicle. I would gather, I'm a big mixed martial arts fan, so I would gather all of the mixed martial arts blog posts and news for the day and copy paste them into a Word document so I could read the Word document, which had all the articles in it. And if my manager walked by, it would just look like I was working because, I had a Word document open. It's surely he's doing something. But if I had been surfing the internet, it would have been obvious. And I did get busted for surfing the internet multiple times in that job. I got a couple write-ups or whatever. One time I got pretty close to getting fired, but I never got fired. But man, you can just tell I was miserable during this time in my life. I really was. I would wake up in the morning, alarm goes off at 6. I just lay in bed kind of staring at the ceiling fan, and I just had this kind of dull, achy feeling in my body because I knew I had to go fake my way through another day. I knew that I was not living the life I was meant to live. There was something inauthentic about the way I was living my life, and it was eating me up inside, basically. Now, if you have a corporate job and you like it, I'm not knocking you, okay? Everybody's cut from a different mold, and some people enjoy the security and the predictability and all the stuff that goes into that, right? So I'm not knocking you. Most people that are listening to this, though, if you have a job, you'd rather leave it, right? But I was miserable inside. It was definitely the most unhappy I've ever been, the most depressed I've ever been, the most anxious I've ever been. My girlfriend at the time, who's now my fiance, she noticed it. She called me out on it multiple times, told me that she thought I could be happier, and she noticed that I was unhappy when I got off work, and it was clearly draining me and kind of eating away at me to have a job that was not in alignment with my true values, my purpose, the things that I enjoy doing, and what the mark I want to leave on the world when I'm gone. And I didn't really realize that at the time. I just knew that I was miserable. And eventually, after faking and suffering my way through that and pissing off my manager enough times, it was obvious that it was time for me to go. So there wasn't really any one breaking point that made me quit my job. It was just more or less an accumulation of 3 or 4 years of pain and frustration and living the way I just described. I lived at my job every day, just trying to find ways to entertain my monkey brain and keep myself sane. So I finally quit. And when I quit that job, something in me kind of shifted. I don't know what it was exactly, but I really started to get into personal development. I really started to read books, listen to podcasts. I went and got a job because I needed money still, of course. So I went and got a job at a local grocery store, and so again, I was working for money, and that job was only $9 an hour. And here I was, a college graduate and everything. But I wanted a job that didn't eat up a lot of my mental bandwidth so I could focus on the bigger picture. I knew that at that point, after having 15, 20, 25 different jobs, including the corporate one being the worst of them all, I realized that no job was ever going to give me the lifestyle that I wanted. Jobs are so difficult to shape into you living a lifestyle you want to live. When you have a job, it's almost impossible to do that unless you create your own job as an entrepreneur. And that's what I started to realize at that time. And so at the grocery store, I went around and shook hands with all of the customers that came in. I asked them what they did for a living, and if I met an entrepreneur, I would get real curious. I'd be like, wow, so you make money without having a job, huh? Like, how in the hell do you do that? How does that work? I was real peculiar or curious about that. And I was also just getting really interested in learning about investing. I had a little tiny copy of Rich Dad, Poor Dad that somehow I found on Amazon. I actually meant to order the full-size copy, and when it came in the mail, it was like literally 2 inches by 2 inches, like a tiny, tiny book. And it fit in my pocket. So I would read it when I was in the bathroom at the grocery store. And when I had to run errands for the grocery store, I'd park the van on the side of the road and read the book some more and read other books and listen to other podcasts and things like that. And so, yeah, I was really just mesmerized by this world of entrepreneurship, and it just seemed like this sexy, powerful, awesome thing. It's like, I want to be an entrepreneur, right? But at the same time, it was so confusing to understand how in the world do you survive in that world? How do you, when you've earned a paycheck by doing what you were told to do for your entire life, and then you go and you try to be the one who decides what needs to be done to earn money, which is what an entrepreneur does. It's very different. It's very scary. So if some of you are in this position, then you may be feeling this right now. What really got me through it was one day I met a young guy who came into the grocery store. He was like 23 years old at the time, and I was older than that by 2 or 3 years. And he flipped houses. He always stroll in there wearing sandals, carrying his water jug, not a care in the world. He drove a cool Mustang with rims on it. And he had it's just like he had all the time in the day. And so I bugged him a bunch, because he came in all the time. He eventually taught me how to go out and find deals. He taught me how to write yellow letters to ugly houses, drive around, drive for dollars, write down their addresses, and then write them those letters, and then get leads for it, basically, because that was the biggest challenge for his business. And so I found one where a lady had a house she wanted to sell. She called me off the yellow letter, and I think I ran to the bathroom of the grocery store to answer her phone call. So here I am in the bathroom of the grocery store, wearing an apron with no money in my bank account, talking to a lady about buying her house for $90,000 or something. I was terrified. I didn't know what to do. I knew my mentor would be the one buying it, not me. But I was still talking to her about it, and I didn't know what to say. It was really scary. But he coached me through it. He told me what to say. He had me go over there and take pictures of the house for him before we were going to get it under contract. And a funny story is I went over there, and the tenant wouldn't let me in unless I left and bought him Burger King breakfast for some reason. So here I am with $10 to my name. I go to Burger King, buy this guy hash browns, sausage, egg, and biscuit, coffee, orange juice, all that stuff. And I showed back up at the house, and he was inside, but he had a pit bull chained in the front yard, and I had to make it to the front door without getting my leg bit off, while also balancing all this tray of drinks and carrying a sack of breakfast food. And so I literally remember like running through the front yard, kind of hurtling like a football player, just keeping my legs out of reach of this pit bull who was snapping at my heels. Got to the front door. The pit bull ran out of chain, so I was safe. The guy let me in, reluctantly still, even though I had his breakfast. Got the pictures, shared them with my mentor, who said, "Oh, you know what? We didn't really need those pictures. That thing's going to be a teardown anyways." So it turns out it was kind of all for nothing, but I had to go through the process anyways. And then he bought the house a few weeks later, and he invited me to a restaurant. And when we sat down, he whipped out his checkbook, and he scribbled something on it, tears it off, and slides it across the table. And it had my name on it, and it was for $1,000. And that was a very pivotal moment for me, coming from working for money, having bosses and jobs my whole life, to I just received my first dollar without having a job. I mean, I had, cut yards for people in high school, which is technically my own business, but this was different. I got $1,000 for only about 3 hours of work, if you actually totaled up the time I spent on that deal. And so that would be $333 an hour that I made on that deal. And that's only making $1,000 bucks. Of course, he went and made 20 or 30 grand by flipping it. But I was making $9 an hour at the grocery store at the time. $9 an hour, $333 an hour. It was hard for me not to see the light at that moment, and I did. And my mentor said something to me, "Yeah, imagine if you did this all the time." And that's when the light bulb went off. And so I quit the grocery store. I dove into real estate full time at that point. Over the next 12 months, I found that same guy 7 or 8 more deals. I got 7 or 8 more $1,000 checks. My tax return that year was like $9,000 or $8,000. I made zero money. I was like underneath the poverty line. My girlfriend had to pay the mortgage 1 month. I didn't have any money that year. It sucked. My first year as an entrepreneur, I was broke all the time. Every day was a challenge. I was nervous. I had to really push hard. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life, was figure out how to become an entrepreneur, going from the working world to the entrepreneur world. It was the most difficult puzzle that I've had to solve to date, is to figure out how to make my own money in this world. But the next year I did really well, and things took off like they often do for entrepreneurs who stick with it. And I made more money than I had ever made in a year by far in the second year. So I hope that this story, there's a lot more to the story, of course, but I wanted to share a bit about what I went through from the corporate world and being miserable to taking that leap of faith, and where it led me. I do believe that entrepreneurship is by far your best chance of, 1, making a lot of money, but 2, crafting a lifestyle that you really enjoy living. It's tough to listen to Tony Robbins and Tim Ferriss and Robert Kiyosaki and Brendan Burchard and take their advice and do all that stuff when you have a job. Because yeah, you'd love to structure your day in a certain way and achieve certain goals, but if most of your time is spent sitting at a desk doing something just for money that has nothing to do with you or your passions or your goals, you're not going to have much time or energy to do those things. So I do believe that being an entrepreneur is an almost non-negotiable requirement for lifestyle design. So that's the piece of the story I wanted to share with you guys today. Again, I really appreciate all the listeners of this podcast. If you have a question you want me to answer on a future episode, or a topic you want me to cover, something you're struggling with, shoot me an email, brian@brianelwood.net. I've done episodes in the past where I'm just answering the questions of our listeners, and I'm happy to do that for you as well. So shoot me your question. I'd love to see it. Thank you guys for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode. Peace.